If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview.
The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, July 22nd, and this is 6 months after President Donald Trump took office for the second time. And so the White House this week marked 6 months in office, as they describe it, with historic successes. And the White House issued an article on the whitehouse.gov talking about President Trump celebrating the most successful 6 months in office for any president in modern American history. And they go on to list quite a few things that he has done, including, remember, signing over 200 executive orders literally the day that he took office in January. But we need to break this down and see, is that in alignment with conservative priorities? How much has Trump actually gotten done in 6 months, and how much more work is there to do for the issues that concern us, which of course are biblical principles, life, family issues, ensuring border protection. I mean, all of these things, the economy, that deal with our daily life. Because remember, the government is not just here to be popular or because we like a one party over the other in office, or politics for sake of itself. Always, when we step back and we look at how government is serving us, we need to put it in the proper biblical context. And that means that it is an institution ordained by God. It is the one of the three spheres of government, the civil government, and we often on the show also talk about the church government and the family government, that are three coordinate institutions under God's ultimate authority. And he delegates his specific limited authority to these institutions to operate functionally so that we can, as individuals, in our personal lives and in our family lives, in our communities, in our churches, live out our rights before God, our Creator. And so the civil government, the whole purpose, whether it is a constitutional republic like here in America, or whether it looks like something else, the institution of government is ordained to promote good, restrain evil, and ensure that the rights of those that they're protecting, which in this case are American citizens, that our rights that are given by God, our Creator, that are pre-political, that were given by God to every human being before the ordainment and establishment of America, that those rights are protected in the best way possible. So government is not a necessary evil. It is actually an institution that is implemented by God for our good. He designed it in order to serve a very specific purpose. And so we always have to keep all of that in mind as we are looking at and critiquing how any administration is doing, whether it's someone we voted for, whether it's someone we didn't, whether we like the current president in Congress or not, current governor in your state or not. All of those basic principles need to be at the foundation. So let's talk about pro-life and conservative wins with my first guest, Father Frank Pavone, who is the founder of Priests for Life and one of the best advocates for pro-life issues. I love having Father Frank on this show because he absolutely gets these principles and has dedicated his life to advancing the policy regardless of who is in office. So good morning, Father Frank, and how do you rate the 6 months of the Trump administration?
Well, good morning, Jenna. And as usual, you just expressed these things perfectly in your opening remarks. I rate this as incredibly historic. I have had not only the praise of God on my lips and in my heart, as the scriptures say, but I have had Stars and Stripes Forever playing on repeat on my phone and my computer.
I love it.
Because
I love it.
what's happening here truly is unbelievable. I mean, obviously we could go through the long list of policy achievements, promises made, promises kept. But I want to really urge our listeners, take the time to read, explore, dig into, and digest all the details of the accomplishments of these last 6 months. As you said, Jenna, the White House has been very good at publishing these things. We have our press secretary giving these weekly updates, in her social media posts. Let's look at what happened this week, week by week, and all these accomplishments. And the reason I say pause and really take some time to study them is that we risk missing American history unfolding before our eyes if we rely only on passively receiving from the media what has happened. I mean, even our best friends, good conservative media, there's just not enough time to even give a cursory glance at all these policy accomplishments. So I want to urge each listener to take it upon themselves, spend the time to delve into some of the details. For example, obviously we know the big, beautiful bill. I mean, it codifies dozens of the executive orders that you referred to because, an executive order is only as good as the will of whoever is in the White House to keep it in effect. But you codify it into law, and you've got a much longer lasting policy. And so, you dig into some of the details that we're just not hearing about. For example, of course, when it comes to pro-life, we've got the Trump accounts that were created for, every American child is going to have this private investment account seeded with $1,000. The employers of the parents of these children can pay into it. And you're going to have just a major turnaround for the financial well-being of the family and of children, which of course just does nothing but encourage a culture of life. You've got historic school choice funding that was included in this big, beautiful bill. And school choice means, more education in the things we believe in, the biblical worldview and Christian values and pro-life positions. And we can go into these specific policies that, are not always in the headlines. But then we can look at, if we take a few steps back, why have we had such a deliberate, sustained, and in many ways effective attack on our Christian values in America for so long? Because the Democrats have held on to certain strongholds, not only in terms of public policy, but in terms of money pouring into their favorite causes, in terms of agencies that fund these causes, in terms of the deep state carrying out these causes, and in terms of academia and major media supporting these causes. Notice what these 6 months have accomplished. President Trump and his team have taken aim at destroying Democrat strongholds. Look what they have done with rooting out, first of all, exposing, the ridiculous spending of billions of dollars to feed left-wing causes, not only domestically but internationally, exposing it, rooting it out, and then what our friend Dan Bongino calls total personnel warfare, firing after firing, get rid of, first of all, people, employment positions that we don't need, and secondly, especially those bureaucrats who don't feel they're accountable to the voters, and they just pursue left-wing agendas no matter who's in office. President Trump has taken aim at this and effectively begun to address this problem. He's got the media on their heels. He's suing now very effectively media outlets who misrepresent the truth and who attack him and us. And then you've got the academia. Look what he's doing to these major institutions of academia in America that have just been left-wing fanatics, saying, listen, you're not going to get federal funding if you're biased, if you're soaked in DEI policy, if you're not giving people of faith the opportunity to make their voices heard on campus. And so he has been doing all these things, and then getting win after win in the courts as well, including in the Supreme Court. I mean, I look back at these 6 months and I say, oh my goodness, this is it just leaves you speechless.
I think that's a wonderful summary and such an excellent look that's separate and apart from the media drama and some of this. I was looking at some of the headlines. Father Frank Pavone, my special guest this morning, that of course the mainstream media that he has effectively just neutered has said, and their headlines are not favorable. You know, CNN, 6 months into Trump's second term, voters remain divided. Mother Jones, 6 months in, Trump has made American life immeasurably worse. Today.com, Trump marks 6 months of second term amid Epstein fallout. You know, all of these would and then Newsweek was my favorite. 6 months in, Trump has too many failures to count. And of course, they have to label that opinion because it's just so ridiculous. And even when we look at what Trump is still projected to do, and the promises that still remain to be kept, this is only 6 months in, and there are major pro-life and conservative wins, not just in the concrete policy that you articulated, in things like enforcing the Hyde Amendment. That was one of his executive orders.
Right.
Reinstated the Mexico City policy, pardons for the clinic protesters. I mean, that was great, who were unfairly persecuted under the FACE Act. Hopefully that'll get repealed soon in Congress. But even culturally, you mentioned DEI and this shift. When he has abolished DEI for federal contracts, he said, this country will only affirm two genders. I mean, there has been, I think, a distinct cultural shift that, while that's not a specific policy initiative, to have that coming from the White House, I think really sets a different tone for the nation. And you're seeing that play out, I think, in culture a little bit.
Yes. Well, if you look at the right track, wrong track polling, one of the things, obviously, as we all know, when we are dealing with elections, trying to prognosticate what's going to happen in an election, how many citizens think the country's going in the right way or the wrong way? You compare the beginning of last year to now, those Americans who believe the country's on the right track have more than doubled. Now, that by itself is a testament to 6 months of success in the eyes of the voters. And, of course, that's what matters in America. We govern ourselves. But there's another thing, too. I think what we're seeing, Jenna, is the Butler effect. We just celebrated the 1 year anniversary, in a sense, the great intervention of God saving the life of President Trump from that assassination attempt. Okay. July 13th. The Butler effect, as I call it. Something shifted in not that President Trump wasn't a believer before. He was, and he professed faith in Jesus Christ. And he said, look, I'm not the Savior. Jesus is. But what has happened since then, and many of those close to President Trump have acknowledged this, and really he's acknowledged it himself, is that he has become supercharged with an awareness, number one, of the protective hand of God, and that therefore the mandate, not just that the voter, we talk about the mandate the voters gave him. No, God gave him a mandate also. Now, we don't believe in the divine right of kings or anything like that. We're talking about God's providence, which our founders acknowledged in the Declaration. Okay, so he has been more sensitized to that than ever before. And secondly, more sensitive than ever before that every moment counts. From 1 minute to the next, we don't know if we're going to be alive. From 1 minute to the next, our life is in God's hands. From 1 minute to the next, we have a sacred duty to accomplish as much as we can of the mission God has given us. And I think that this accounts in large measure. I mean, President Trump was already a hard worker. He already went into his second term knowing more, about D.C. and about, issues than ever before. And yet there's another dimension that we're seeing unfold, which accounts for 6 months of absolutely historic victories, and that is this Butler effect, I believe, and that is part of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And, it is a celebration of the 1 year anniversary. I like how you characterize that, because even though that was a horrifying event, it was a somber moment for sure for America. I really do think that that was the divine intervention of the Lord. I don't think anyone can deny that. And that that clear display of God's intervention and his protection for this nation through the protecting the life of President Trump, that is something that we should celebrate, because we know that God is present. He is still moving in this country, and he's not done with America yet. And so we can be thankful for that. We can be thankful specifically for President Trump and his family, of course. But then the outflow and effect of that for the nation can't be understated. And I like how you express that, the Butler effect. And so as we're moving forward, then in terms of pro-life wins, we're seeing this change, and I think there is a cultural shift. I'm loving seeing even more advertisements I've seen from like our friends at Focus on the Family. I had the news on the other day, and there were many commercials from them, talking about choosing life. I mean, just kind of this blatant, open cultural shift to say that we need to help mothers choose life, and we need to continue that policy. For the next 6 months, what are your projections on the things that we need to focus on and where the Trump administration is going for specifically pro-life issues?
Well, we have part of the 6 month historic victories have been that we've won the greatest victory since the Dobbs decision, which is the stopping of this Medicaid funding, of Planned Parenthood and the whole abortion industry. This has been, part of the miracle of this, and I think what we have to keep in mind going forward is that we have got not only a chief executive in President Trump who gets things done, he is a miracle worker, together with Mike Johnson and John Thune, in being able to get 535 human beings to a mechanism that consists of 535 human beings, United States Congress, to actually get something done. Now, we're not talking about, getting the Democrats to do anything, but because we have the majority of Republicans, nevertheless, a majority doesn't guarantee you're going to get something done. I think it's absolutely miraculous, not only the big, beautiful bill, but then the rescissions bill that followed immediately on the heels of that, the immense amount of money spending that's being cut. What I'm saying is that this, combined with Supreme Court victories like, for example, slapping down these district court judges who think that they can be an antidote to the president and issue these nationwide injunctions that stop executive actions, the Supreme Court put that in its place, as we were hoping it would. So what I'm saying is this, that for the pro-life movement, for all the different things, and the Supreme Court victory, by the way, in South Carolina, opening the door for states to do even more to defund the abortion on the state level, we should have more confidence than ever that all the things we are already trying to do, stop funding the abortion industry, promote peaceful protest and direct intervention, fund the pregnancy centers. We should have more confidence that both in the legislative branch as well as in the courts, we have got an open door. We have got a smoother path. It's always going to be a battle day by day, but we have got more probability of success now. Again, not just look at these 6 months and look at the path forward, not just in terms of a strength in the White House. Everybody look at this in terms of renewed strength in the legislature, because we have leaders that can actually get something done, and renewed strength in the courts, which seem to be just over and over again reaffirming our freedom to govern ourselves. And if the American people can govern themselves, that means we're going to be more pro-life. I think we've talked before, Jenna, about how we at Priests for Life are going to be focusing on late-term abortion, because I think we can actually get, both on the state and even on the federal level, despite everything that's been said about, no abortion bans or anything like that on the federal level. Nevertheless, we have a strong consensus in America that aborting a healthy baby of a healthy mother at 6, 7, 8 months into the pregnancy is absolutely barbaric, and no civilized society should allow it. Most nations don't allow it. And I think that with all these factors in place that we've already reviewed here very briefly, I think we could actually achieve some of this.
That's amazing. Well, we've got to take a break here, and Father Frank Pavone, so much more to talk about, and I so appreciate your optimism per the usual, but it's excitement because we're actually getting things done. We're not just in this defensive posture that conservatives and pro-lifers were in for the 4 years of Biden, and thankfully, we are with an administration that really does agree with conservative priorities, that agrees with pro-life, and I'm happy to see that the Trump administration is taking that into his second term, because there were some concerns initially during the campaign. Would he be as ardently pro-life as he was his first term? And I'm really grateful to see that. So Father Frank Pavone, you can always follow him on X. I'd encourage you to do that, and we will be right back to talk more about the first 6 months of Donald Trump right after this.
Hey, I'm Brant, and her name is Sherry.
Hello.
She's a friend of mine whom we were just praying for because of a surgery she just went through.
Yes, and I am very happy about something you actually talk about all the time, which is
Medishare.
That is right.
Yeah. So what was your experience like with Medishare and the healthcare bills?
Honestly, Brant, seamless. And what a blessing that is when you're already nervous about a health issue, which I was.
Yeah.
Members shared my expenses. There were zero problems. And let me tell you, having people pray with you when you call in with your need, that is just...
It is refreshing.
Yes, that's what it is.
What I keep telling people. People love Medishare, and they love saving tons of money, too. The typical family can save $500 a month.
I am very thankful for Medishare. It is so different, and I mean different in a very, very good way.
It is good different. Call now. They're easy to talk to, and you can get a price within 2 minutes. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
While in the emergency room with my wife, as she was struggling with the COVID-19 virus herself, and I looked at her, I said, "Are you scared?" And she said, a little bit, but I've been through worse.
The Certainty of Mankind's History with Uncertainty, an article by Peter Rosenberger.
And then, as her fever was approaching almost 103, she started singing "In Christ Alone." I place my trust and find my glory in the power of the cross. And that's how she has anchored herself in the certainty of Christ through her huge medical journey that has included 80 surgeries, both of her legs amputated, 100 doctors have treated her, 12 hospitals, and now the COVID-19 virus. And so when we live with those kinds of uncertainties, anchoring ourselves in Christ alone, that's the only place we can run to where there is certainty.
To read this article and more, visit afa.net/The Stand.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. If Tulsi Gabbard is right, then some of the most powerful people in the Obama administration politicized the nation's intelligence community to take down President Trump. It was essentially a years-long coup against the president. Gabbard is the director of national intelligence. She says not only was Barack Obama involved, but so was Hillary Clinton. And they're using words like treasonous. I'm not surprised by Gabbard's revelations, but I'm going to be very surprised if people are actually held accountable. And that's my word of caution to Republicans. Don't mess around with this. If there really is evidence of wrongdoing, arrest those responsible, including Clinton and Obama. As Obama once said, no one's above the law, especially the president. But if we get to the midterms and we've had nothing more than hearings and hot air on cable TV, the Republicans will face disaster at the ballot box. It's time to either fish or cut bait. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we are looking back over President Donald Trump's first 6 months in his second term in office and rating that scorecard. And of course, we compare this not just to smacking down the left or all of these, viral memes like the Coldplay cam. I'm still laughing that's viral over the last couple of days. If you want to hear my rant, I did that at the end of the program yesterday about that issue. But we always have to take a principled look and measure any administration, any president, whether they have an R or a D or any other letter behind their name, and rate them according to the standard of biblical truth and what God himself provides as the rationale and the purpose for a legitimate government. And of course, that is to promote good, restrain evil, and be a force in civil society to ensure that our rights that come from God our Creator before government, pre-political, are preserved and protected through that government. And government can look a lot of different ways. God did not ordain and establish specifically only a constitutional republic. Our founders, in their wisdom, did that because they believed that that was the best possible mechanism and structure of a government that could legitimately function in the way it's supposed to under God that they acknowledged is our ultimate authority. And so we have the declaration that provided the mandate, and then we have the U.S. Constitution that provides the mechanism to implement a civil government that is supposed to be ordained to promote good and restrain evil. And how we define good and evil is not on our own terms. Truth is not relative. We always define good and evil how God himself does. God is the person of truth. Good cannot be anything separate and apart from the person of God. And so when we are looking at these wins, when we're looking at the losses, when we're looking at the criticism, when we're looking at what still remains to be done, all of those things, when we critique civil government, it should not be whether we are for or against Donald Trump as a person, for or against Joe Biden when he was in office, but what is the administration and Congress and our government actually doing that is in alignment with the truth. And that's where we here at American Family Association also have AFA Action, which is specifically designed to promote policy that advances those biblical ideas and the biblical strategy for policy in the areas of life, family, marriage, ensuring that we can, as human beings made in the image of God, carry out our right to exercise our life and our freedoms in accordance with the will of God. And the government not only doesn't prevent that or thwart that, but actually promotes that in a civil society. Wouldn't that be amazing if every government agent on every level had that view and actually had policy that promoted that? Well, so how are we doing on some of these broader conservative issues? Well, let's welcome in Walker Wildman, who is the vice president here at the American Family Association. And Walker, with all of that, I know, we do a lot over in policy at AFA Action, and these are things that directly concern all of us as conservatives, and have since the foundation of AFA. And so, give us your rating of Trump's first 6 months in terms of conservative priorities.
Yeah, I would give President Trump an A, not an A plus, but I would give him an A on conservative priorities, just because at the executive level, they've done a lot that's in their purview, in their authority. And unfortunately, you get into, when you talk about changing laws and changing spending and where money goes, just like we dealt with the whole abortion provider discussion a couple weeks ago, you have to get both chambers on board with it. So you've got to get a majority in both chambers if you're using the reconciliation method of passing legislation. And without that, you've got to get 60 votes in the Senate if you don't use the reconciliation once a year tactic. So unfortunately, when you're looking at changing laws and changing where money is appropriated, it's a whole lot more difficult to get consensus there. But President Trump, with what's under his purview, has done a really good job advancing conservative principles, and he's virtually at least attempted to fulfill all of his campaign promises. As far as what he promised on the campaign and what he's doing as president. And the mere fact that we were able to, while it's only 12 months, and that's disappointing, and that's not the standard, the fact that President Trump and the White House were committed to defunding abortion providers for at least a year through Medicaid reimbursements, that in and of itself is a generational win. And once again, it's only 12 months. It should have been longer, and I want to note that I'm not completely giving credence to this, but I do want to highlight the fact that actually got done, because if we don't look back at where we came from with the Bushes and the McCains of the world, then it's easy to look at this and go, well, I mean, they're doing all right. Well, compared to where we came from, President Trump and his team are doing pretty good. The other thing I want to note on the border, which is a biblical issue, and that is national sovereignty and the Lord establishing boundaries of the earth. The fact that President Trump got the entire border wall funded and not just 10 miles of it or 50 miles of it is a really, really big deal, because we all remember the fight during the first term. They were fighting tooth and nail. I'm talking about the Republicans and the Democrats. They were fighting Trump tooth and nail not to give him any wall funding. And so he would get 10 miles here and 10 miles there, and he would kind of piece together 50 miles of a wall. But with this bill that they passed a couple weeks ago, they got the entire southern border funded for the wall. So there's more wins there, and we can talk personnel. But I think President Trump's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, and all of those priorities that you highlighted, I mean, we certainly wouldn't have seen in the former administration under Joe Biden. And so even if we can all point to things, in the One Big Beautiful Bill that aren't perfect, or we would have liked to see go further, like you mentioned, the 12 months of defunding of Planned Parenthood, well, that's 12 months more than we got under the prior administration. And that is paving the way to hopefully have another 12 months after that, and to start rolling this back instead of just the absolute careening that we were heading off a cliff, it seemed like, with all of the, woke DEI, diversity, equity nonsense that was under the Biden administration that Kamala Harris was poised to take even further. So this is a reshifting and a refocus, I think, for the direction of the culture. And so let's talk about also the Supreme Court wins. I know that the Center for Judicial Renewal is really focused with AFA Action on highlighting judges that are being nominated to the federal bench that are conservative, that are originalist, and thankfully we have at least generally a majority on the Supreme Court that is giving us great opinions, like protecting the right of parents to opt out of insane LGBTQ mafia nonsense in elementary schools. We're seeing some of these wins for parents, for religious freedom. That wouldn't happen without conservative judges.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what we've done over at the Center for Judicial Renewal under AFA Action is we've begun playing a more prominent role in the entire topic of the federal judiciary. And what that involves is that involves not only reviewing and filing amicus briefs in current cases, but also looking at judge seat vacancies and having a say on who fills those vacancies. President Trump right now has over 60 vacancies on the federal judiciary that he can fill. Now, some of those he won't fill, or at least not right now, because they're in Democrat states where some of the Democrat senators have a blue slip and they can say, no, we don't like that person, et cetera. So of the 60, let's say there's probably 30 to 40 that President Trump can fill and get confirmed in pretty short order over the next few months. And so that's what we're working on. If you go over to afaaction.net, right there on the homepage, you can click on Center for Judicial Renewal. And when you do that, you can view a list of current pending judges that are currently pending before the U.S. Senate, both either in the Judiciary Committee or for a floor vote. And we actually rank them there. So we have two nominations that President Trump has put forth that we have a priority confirm ranking on, which means we think they need to be confirmed in very short order because of their stellar record. One of those is Joshua Devine, and the other one is Jordan Pratt. So both of those, I think, are out of Missouri for the district up there. But nonetheless, we're doing research and evaluations and communication with the Senate like we've never done before. And the goal here is to put judges on the judiciary that respect the Constitution, that are loyal to the Constitution, and have a worldview that is consistent with the Constitution and the Founding Fathers. And that's a big, big difference there. In the past, at times, we've had judges that call themselves conservatives that don't have the worldview that is in sync with and consistent with the worldview of our Founding Fathers. And so we're looking at worldview. A lot of other groups aren't looking at worldview, but we're looking at it along with their rulings, their opinions, and have they displayed courage? That's another big factor as well.
Those are incredibly important because, of course, worldview dictates how these judges view what we just talked about in the beginning of this segment, which is the purpose of government, what the role of government is. I mean, do they see this as promoting good, restraining evil, protecting the rights of Americans, staying faithful to the text of the law, understanding that the judiciary is under the U.S. Constitution? It's not that they can just go and use their legal opinions as kind of a scratch pad for opinion pieces, like what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson apparently thinks that the purpose of her sitting there on the benches is to just write op-eds. So the two names, though, that you mentioned, Joshua Devine and Jordan Pratt, I think those are probably names that most of our listeners wouldn't be familiar with. And these are district court positions. And I want to highlight this, Walker, because I think that there's so much media emphasis when it's a Supreme Court justice, but then for a lot of these other judges, almost every other position on the federal bench, we don't hear about that in media, even though they have to go through U.S. Senate confirmation. And so we kind of forget about that. And so what can listeners do to help the cause of AFA action and say, you know, these are two judges that maybe nobody's heard about, but they do need to be priority confirmed?
Yeah, the best thing to do for our listeners is to go over to afaaction.net, and we have a recent alert that we sent out. If you go to our AFA Action Alert tab on afaaction.net, we actually provide a form where you can email your senator or your senators and ask them to confirm President Trump's nominees. So this includes both sub-cabinet positions, which a lot of people don't know this. There's over 100 sub-cabinet positions for the administration that are waiting for a floor vote in the U.S. Senate. So they've been through committee, they're awaiting a floor vote, and they're just at a standstill. They can't go do their job because the Senate hasn't voted on their confirmation. Then you have these judicial nominations, of which there's building up. We're getting close to 10 or a dozen judicial nominations that are pending before the Senate right now, whether in committee or on the full floor, that also need a vote. So the message that we're sending is to for the Senate to stay in Washington through the August recess and confirm President Trump's nominees. And that messaging is consistent with the White House. President Trump put out a statement on this the other day that the Senate needs to work longer and harder. And this is where, if we're not careful, we'll end up with a less satisfactory administration than we could have, and that is if we allow the Senate to not do their job. Because John Thune told us all along over the last 6 months and before that they're going to work harder and longer than anybody else, and they're going to prioritize President Trump's administration's priorities. Well, here we are, and the Senate is working. They're working basically Tuesday through Thursday and going home. Now they come in on Monday afternoon and they leave Thursday afternoon. So they're working basically 3 full days in Washington, and there's a huge backlog. And so that's pretty much the main thing that we're pushing right now, is for the Senate to do more to get President Trump's not only judicial nominations but other positions as well filled. And to your point earlier, you were talking about the Supreme Court and some of the rulings that they've had. Earlier in the year, there were some pretty bad rulings from the Supreme Court, some pretty disappointing rulings, whether we're talking immigration, et cetera. But they really turned it around towards the end of the term and had several really good rulings over the last 2 months towards the end of June. And what I want to note about that is, if we're not careful in these midterms and we don't retain full control of the U.S. Senate, we put the Supreme Court in jeopardy here, the makeup of the Supreme Court, because Thomas and Alito are getting up there in age. Now, we don't want them to go anywhere, and when they do go somewhere, they need to be replaced with a stellar constitutionalist. But nonetheless, my point is that we have to conservatives have to maintain control of the U.S. Senate. If not, then should there be a vacancy on the high court or even on lower courts, it's going to put that entire process in jeopardy. and put it at a standstill if Democrats run the Senate. So that's pretty much the memo going into the midterms as far as what we should be looking out for.
Yeah, really well said. Walker Wildman, the vice president here at the American Family Association, speaking of the work that we are doing at AFA Action and where conservatives need to focus and the priorities as we look back over the first 6 months of President Trump's second term and look ahead to the 3.5 years, because we don't want, Walker, I think, a repeat of Trump's first term in the sense that then Speaker Paul Ryan and then the Senate as well in his first term really didn't take advantage of having that trifecta of saying, let's do lockstep. He should be signing legislation every day that either repeals bad legislation or is like the FACE Act, that would be great, or advancing other conservative priorities. And the Senate should be swiftly confirming some of these great judicial nominees. I mean, there should be work every day in Washington, not just Tuesday through Thursday, because we don't have the time to waste. And so as we're looking ahead toward the midterms, we don't want a repeat of the first administration that basically became not really a lame duck. I don't think President Trump ever does that. There's no lame duck bone in his body. But at the same time, when the Democrats took over the House, that was how in his the second part of his term, that was what led to, the ridiculous sham impeachment. And then, all of these things that just totally derailed the second half. So as we're looking at the midterms, where do you see the concerns? Because right now, Republicans have a very, very slim majority in the House and the Senate, and it could go either way.
Yeah, I think the next 12 months are very pivotal in that the White House and the Congress, meaning the majority, the Republicans, they're going to have to make sure that they check off everything on their list of things to do that they promised the American people. And I know this may seem tertiary and you didn't bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up. And that is these ridiculous Epstein files that we know exist. According to Alan Dershowitz, he says they exist. And he was one of Epstein's associates, and I think he represented him legally in some cases as well. But this whole slow walk-in, the Epstein files, is ridiculous. And I understand some people say, why is that relevant? What does that have to do with the midterms? Well, it's a critical part of accountability and transparency that was promised during the midterm, during the 2024 election. And so there's a lot of voters out there that are frustrated that this Epstein guy was human trafficking, sex trafficking, underage girls, rampant abuse, and got put in jail for it. And all of a sudden, he doesn't have a client list. Like, who was using his services? And so I think that the frustration amongst voters, and this cuts across party lines, is that people who are in tight with the elites and the people in power, they get a pass for criminality, which is not how our Constitution and our founding fathers intended for the justice system to work. It should be equally applied across the board. And so President Trump and the DOJ, they're going to have to come clean on this Epstein stuff and release it all. Now, I understand there's victims involved, so you have to be careful there. But the Epstein list and all this information, it needs to all be released, and for transparency's sake. That actually is a very important part of the transparency and accountability, which was a core tenet of the Trump campaign in 2024.
I could not agree more. And we're going to take a break here. Walker Wildman, and he's sticking around to continue through the remainder of the program to talk about Trump's first 6 months and then what other promises he needs to fulfill. And I could not agree with you more on, overall the full context that we've talked, but specifically the Epstein files, because this isn't just about, one obscure issue. It's about transparency, accountability, genuine, true justice, and ensuring that we're not run by a shadow government of people in power that are withholding accountability for bad actors, that we know that the people that we elected are actually running the government, and we're ensuring that there's accountability for all sides. If there are Republican names on that list, then, okay, that's the truth is the truth. That's just how it goes. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning with Walker Wildman.
Parenting can be a challenge. On the next Focus on the Family, former youth pastor Doug Fields encourages you to recognize the huge amount of influence you have on your children and explains how to use that influence wisely to raise kids who exhibit confidence, compassion, and competence. That's next time on Focus on the Family with Jim Daly.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
Hi, I'm Tim Moore, Senior Evangelist on Christ in Prophecy. Can you see the signs of the times multiplying all around? Jesus is coming back, and He doesn't want His people to be unprepared. To stay up to date about unfolding events and get a biblical perspective on the signs of the times, listen to Christ in Prophecy here on American Family Radio. Join us Sundays at 11 a.m. Central as we reveal the prophetic hope for those who believe in Jesus Christ, as well as the Bible's warning about God's coming wrath to those who don't yet know Him.
Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. New York City Democrat primary voters chose Marxist Muslim Zohran Mamdani as their candidate to be the city's next mayor. Don't look now, but Mamdani has a counterpart in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Meet Omar Fatah, the first Muslim state senator in Minnesota, campaigning now to be mayor. The son of Somali immigrants whose policies sound like Mamdani's. Omar Fatah supports freezing rent, free college, a $20 minimum wage, legalizing fentanyl test strips, and refusing cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. In short, folks, Minneapolis O is also a Marxist. From Bernie Sanders to AOC, the squad to Mamdani, and now Omar Fatah. We're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. Call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and copays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much MediShare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. MediShare is trusted too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we are talking about the first 6 months of the second term of the Trump administration, and I think overall giving President Trump a solid A in terms of conservative policy priorities, keeping his promises on things like pro-life, on the family, on affirming that there are only 2 genders for the federal government. That's a big step, and in terms of border security, in terms of promoting the economy, making those really good decisions, and a lot of other things. And Walker Wildman, our vice president here at the American Family Association, is my special guest this morning as we discuss this. And, you know, Walker, I was speaking with Frank Pavone earlier in the program about this affirmation that's right and true of only 2 genders and the rollback of DEI policy and kind of this cultural shift that is taking place, and I think really started even before President Trump took office. I mean, I know that there was this concern over the election, and media outlets were suggesting it was going to be very, very, very close. And then we saw that wasn't the case, that even with the popular vote, the American people gave Trump and Congress this mandate in a landslide. And I think there has been a distinct cultural shift in wanting to come back to traditional values, not for its own sake, not that we have to just go back and live in the good old days of the 1950s or anything like that, but coming back to truth. And truth is the same yesterday, today, and forever, because Jesus is the person of truth and he does not change. God does not change. And so the eternal truth that is absolute doesn't change. And we're seeing, I think, this shift back to core values that founded this country and shaped this country because our founders recognized that the truth of God doesn't change, and ultimately He is our divine lawgiver, and how we shape this nation and how we live in this nation is in accordance to that truth. And so, how do you perceive this cultural shift, and how can we maybe take advantage of this moment heading into the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think the polling and the data really affirms what you're talking about here, and that is that people, especially young people, have grown really tired of the cultural Marxism, the woke indoctrination, the constant LGBTQ garbage being shoved in our face. I think young people understand that, hey, this isn't sustainable. That this pagan way of living, this godless way of living, is really not a sustainable trajectory for any civil society. And it left people, looking back, it left people at record levels of depression, record levels of anxiety, marriages and families broken. The carnage was real from a human perspective. And that's what godlessness and atheism and secular worldview gets you. It gets you emptiness is what it gets you. And so I think people, from an instinctive level, began to realize that the trajectory that we were on to create this Marxist utopia wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't good, and there's a lot of human carnage involved with it. And so I think that's what drove a lot of people to turn away from the Democrat Party and go to a more common sense approach. And so that's where we are today. I do think there's somewhat of a revival undercurrent, and I'm talking a biblical spiritual revival undercurrent, not just, some feel-good movement, but I'm talking about people are coming to know Christ. People are coming to the Bible as their source of truth on how to build their life. And they're realizing that not just the Marxism and the wokeness, but even just the last 50 years of rampant divorce, of, substance abuse, of, broken homes and broken families is just not right. It's so messed up. It leaves so many people damaged and hurt that there's got to be a better way to do this. And so that's where young people are really leaning into a simpler way of living. And there's even these trends to get off of social media and almost set up these homestead type lifestyles where you farm and you live off the land, and the mom is able to stay home and care and nurture for the children, even though they may have to make some financial sacrifices. I mean, there's just a lot of tradition that's rooted in Scripture that's coming back, because I think a lot of young people are realizing how empty this secularism is after looking at it the last 30 years.
And that's encouraging for sure. And yet we've also seen that the younger people tend to vote more for some of this liberal ideology when it comes to the ballot box. And just in the last 2 minutes that we have here, how can we use this moment to really capitalize on this move back to traditional values, but put that also in the ballot box so that young people actually vote those values?
Yeah, to your point, I think we need to continue, and when I say we, I'm talking about groups like AFA, American Family Radio, and other Christians around the country. I think we need to drive home the biblical truth mantra. We need to continue hammering that and drive home the point that this is not about conservative ideology, Republicans versus Democrats. This is about how do you build a society and how do you sustain Western civilization so that we can be a blessing to ourselves and to the world for generations to come, and really be biblical stewards is what it ultimately gets down to. And that is following God's precepts for life and godliness. And we can talk about the personal application of that, and then there's a government application of that. But both are necessary for the survival of this nation. So I think we need to continue to drive home the biblical truth aspect of this entire movement and keep drawing people to that. Because if we're not careful, this will morph into a libertarian movement, or a Tea Party movement 2.0, and then in 5 years it'll be come and gone. It'll be here and gone. So I think we need to drive home the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely well said. We have to stay fundamentally centered on the truth so that it's not just godless populism, and that's what we do each and every day here on American Family Radio. So Walker Wildman, really appreciate it. You can follow him on X as well as AFA Action. You can go to afaaction.net, and as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
All God asks of you is faithfulness. Headlines in USA Today. Did you see it this morning? All the odds are against us.